There was a time when the future didn't arrive with explosions or alien invasions. It arrived quietly through laboratories, military facilities, corporate research wings, and sealed government programs. In these visions of tomorrow, the greatest unknown was not space, but the human being itself. Science fiction once imagined progress as a promise. But buried beneath that promise was another idea far more unsettling: that people could be optimized, corrected, repurposed, or rewritten, not as monsters, not as freaks, but as systems. The films in this list do not focus on bodies mutating beyond recognition. They focus on something colder: identity reduced to data, free will treated as a flaw, memory-adjusted behavior, conditioned loyalty programmed. A person no longer valued for who they are, but for how efficiently they can be used. These stories emerged during decades when trust in institutions was quietly eroding. Governments spoke of security, corporations spoke of innovation, scientists spoke of progress, and somewhere in between, the individual became a variable, tested, trained, restrained, or replaced. In these films, control rarely announces itself as tyranny. It arrives disguised as order. What makes these movies enduring is not their technology, but their logic. Each presents a world where systems function perfectly until a human consciousness resists being reduced to a function. Sometimes that resistance is loud. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it fails entirely. But the question always remains the same: at what point does improvement become ownership? This is not a list about heroes saving the world. It is a list about people trapped inside designs that were never built for them to escape. Prisons without bars, programs without off switches, experiments that continue long after consent disappears. Looking back, these films feel less like predictions and more like warnings that were filed away and forgotten. Not because they were wrong, but because they were inconvenient. As technology continues to move forward, these stories remain behind us, locked in time, vaulted, waiting. Not to tell us what the future will be, but to remind us what we once believed was acceptable in the name of progress. 1. Seconds. In seconds, the future does not arrive as a technological marvel. It arrives as a business proposition. A quiet offer made to men who feel their lives have already ended even though their bodies continue to function. The system in this film does not threaten. It persuades. The premise is deceptively simple. A shadowy organization promises rebirth, a new body, a new identity, and a clean escape from regret. There are no machines humming in the background, no visible signs of control. The process is presented as professional, clinical, and voluntary. Consent is signed. Procedures are explained. Everything appears legal, even compassionate. But what Seconds exposes is the illusion of choice inside a system that has already decided the outcome. Once the transformation begins, individuality becomes an inconvenience. The new life is not meant to be lived freely, but performed correctly. The reborn are guided toward acceptable behaviors, acceptable relationships, acceptable desires. Spontaneity is tolerated only as long as it fits the design. The horror of the film is not physical. It is administrative. Identity is treated as a transferable asset. Personality becomes a liability to be managed. When the subject struggles to adapt, the system does not ask why. It simply categorizes the result as a failure. What makes Seconds unsettling is how modern its logic feels. The organization does not operate out of cruelty. It operates out of efficiency. It offers solutions, not domination. And when those solutions break down, the individual is quietly recycled back into the process, useful again, but no longer human in any meaningful sense. There is no rebellion here, no triumph. Only the realization that the system was never designed to restore life. but to harvest it. People are not reborn to be free. They are reprocessed to remain functional. In seconds, the future is not a place you reach. It is a procedure you survive until the system decides you no longer serve a purpose. 2. The Quester tapes. In the Quester tapes, the experiment is not about control through force, but through design. Quester appears human in every visible way. He speaks calmly, reasons logically, and demonstrates curiosity about the world around him. Yet from the moment he is introduced, it is clear that he was never meant to belong to that world. He is a project assembled, trained, and released with limits built into his existence. The system that created Quester treats humanity as a blueprint rather than an experience. Emotions are approximated. Ethics are simulated. Purpose is predefined. His creators do not ask whether he should exist, only whether he functions as intended. The experiment is not hidden in secrecy. It is justified through necessity. Progress requires risk. Advancement demands sacrifice. What makes the film unsettling is how gently the system operates. There are no chains, no obvious restraints. Quester is allowed to move freely, but only within parameters he does not fully understand. His search for his origin is framed as a malfunction, not a right. Knowledge itself becomes restricted access. As Quester uncovers the truth, the system responds not with panic, but with correction. The problem is not that he asks questions. The problem is that he asks the wrong ones. In this world, curiosity is acceptable only when it aligns with design goals. The tragedy of the Quester tapes lies in its restraint. Quester is not destroyed because he is dangerous. He is neutralized because he has become inefficient. Once his curiosity exceeds utility, his existence no longer serves the system that built him. The film suggests a future where humanity is no longer defined by birth, but by specifications. Where being human is not a state of being, but a performance evaluated by those who control the design. 3. Telephone. Telephone presents one of the coldest visions of human experimentation ever put on screen. People transformed into dormant mechanisms waiting to be activated. The individuals at the center of the film live ordinary lives. They do not know they are part of anything larger. That is precisely what makes them effective. Decades earlier, they were subtly conditioned through psychological programming. A simple phrase spoken at the right moment bypasses memory, conscience, and choice. When activated, they carry out instructions without understanding why. They are not soldiers in uniform. They are invisible assets, embedded within society itself. The system in Telephone does not rely on obedience. It relies on forgetting. These people were never meant to remember what was done to them. Their lives were returned to them intact and unremarkable until the moment the system needed them again. In that sense, the experiment never ends. It merely pauses. What makes the film particularly disturbing is the absence of malice. The program was created defensively as a precaution. Human beings were treated as insurance policies activated only in emergencies. No hatred was required, only planning. When the system begins to collapse, the human cost becomes impossible to ignore. These individuals are not villains, yet they are executed for actions they did not choose. Responsibility dissolves. Blame has nowhere to land. Telephone exposes a future where free will is not eliminated openly, but quietly overwritten. A world where people believe they are living normal lives, unaware that their autonomy has already been compromised. Here the system does not imprison the body. It occupies the mind and waits. 4. Capricorn 1. In Capricorn 1, the experiment is not biological or psychological, but narrative. Human beings are placed inside a story written by institutions that value success over truth. The astronauts are not test subjects in a laboratory. They are assets inside a performance designed to preserve national credibility. When a Mars mission becomes impossible, the system does not cancel the dream. It rewrites reality. The astronauts are isolated, monitored, and instructed to continue their roles away from the public, away from agency, away from choice. Their bodies remain alive, but their lives are suspended inside a lie. The system does not see this as cruelty. It sees it as necessity. The astronauts are told they are heroes, even as they are stripped of autonomy. Their value lies not in survival, but in consistency. The illusion must hold. What makes Capricorn 1 resonate with the theme of human experimentation is how seamlessly consent is replaced by obligation. Once selected, the astronauts no longer belong to themselves. Their identities are absorbed into the mission's outcome. Individual lives become expendable variables in a larger equation. As the deception deepens, the system reveals its true priority. The narrative must survive even if the people inside it do not. The astronauts are not meant to return. They are meant to remain believable. The film suggests a future where truth is optional, but systems are permanent. Where people are not altered physically yet, are still transformed into props, sustaining a structure that cannot afford to fail. Here the experiment is simple. How much of a human life can be erased without the world noticing? 5. The Boys from Brazil. In The Boys from Brazil, human experimentation is framed not as a future possibility, but as an ideological obsession that refuses to die. The experiment does not aim to improve humanity. It aims to reproduce it selectively, obsessively, and without consent. Identity in this film is treated as something that can be engineered through repetition rather than lived experience. The central premise revolves around cloning. But the true experiment goes further. It is not enough to recreate a body. The system attempts to recreate circumstances, childhood environments, emotional traumas, parental figures, even moments of loss. Human life becomes a controlled simulation designed to force a predetermined outcome. What makes this approach disturbing is its patience. There is no urgency, no immediate payoff. The experiment unfolds across decades. Individual lives are monitored not for who they become, but for how closely they align with expectation. Deviation is not failure, it is noise. The system behind the experiment does not see itself as cruel. It sees itself as precise. It believes history can be corrected if variables are properly controlled. Free will is acknowledged only as a flaw that must be minimized. As the truth emerges, the film dismantles the illusion that identity can be manufactured through structure alone. The clones do not become identical outcomes. They resist, diverge, and fracture the system's logic simply by living. The Boys from Brazil ultimately exposes the arrogance behind human experimentation, the belief that a person can be reduced to inputs and conditions. It suggests that systems built to control humanity often misunderstand the very thing they seek to replicate. 6. Altered states. Altered states approaches human experimentation from the inside out. Instead of reshaping the body or rewriting memory, the experiment targets consciousness itself. The human mind becomes a laboratory, and identity becomes something fluid, reversible, and dangerously unstable. The system presented in the film operates under the assumption that the self is not fixed. By chemically and psychologically inducing altered states of awareness, researchers attempt to strip away layers of personality, reaching something more primitive and authentic. In doing so, the subject is no longer treated as a person, but as a gateway. What separates this film from more conventional experimentation narratives is its indifference to consequences. The experiment is not militarized or politicized. It is justified through curiosity. Knowledge, not control, becomes the excuse, and that makes it more unsettling. As the process escalates, the subject's humanity begins to dissolve. Physical regression mirrors psychological unraveling. The system does not stop when danger appears, it intensifies. Discovery outweighs safety. The individual becomes expendable in pursuit of insight. The film suggests that once a system gains access to the human mind, boundaries lose meaning. Consent becomes temporary. Identity becomes negotiable. The experiment continues not because it should, but because it can. Altered States presents a future where the most invasive form of control is not imposed from above, but unlocked from within, where the desire to understand humanity becomes indistinguishable from the act of dismantling it. 7. Scanners 2. The New Order. In Scanners 2, The New Order, human experimentation is no longer hidden behind research ethics or scientific ambition. It has been fully absorbed into systems of power. Extraordinary abilities are not anomalies to be studied. They are resources to be owned. Individuals with telepathic powers are identified, conditioned, and weaponized. Their value lies entirely in their utility. Training replaces consent. Control replaces understanding. The system does not ask how these abilities affect the person. It asks only how effectively they can be deployed. What makes the film align with the theme of people turned into systems is its casual treatment of exploitation. The scanners are interchangeable. Their identities are secondary to their function. Loyalty is enforced not through belief, but through leverage. As corruption spreads, the system reveals its fragility. Control depends on obedience, and obedience depends on fear. When that balance breaks, the experiment collapses inward. The scanners are no longer assets, they are liabilities. Scanners 2 suggests a future where human potential is not celebrated, but managed, where extraordinary individuals are absorbed into hierarchies that strip them of autonomy while pretending to offer purpose. In this world, power does not fear humanity. It harvests it until the system can no longer contain what it has created. 8. Project Shadow Chaser. In Project Shadow Chaser, the experiment abandons subtlety. The system no longer hides behind ideology or research. It announces itself through construction. A human-like weapon is built to obey, designed to execute without hesitation, and programmed to exist only in service to command. Identity is not erased accidentally. It is excluded by design. What distinguishes this experiment is its clarity. The subject is not told he is human. He is told he is a tool. Memory is regulated. Emotion is suppressed. Purpose is singular. The system's confidence lies in its belief that obedience can be engineered if enough humanity is removed. But the film's tension emerges when traces of individuality surface anyway. The system did not anticipate ambiguity. It did not account for reflection doubt or moral friction. The subject begins to question, not because he was programmed to, but because something remained unaccounted for. The response is immediate recalibration, containment termination. The system does not negotiate with malfunctioning assets. It replaces them. In this world, self-awareness is not evolution. It is a defect. Project Shadow Chaser frames human experimentation as a manufacturing process, where success is measured by predictability. It suggests a future where the danger is not machines becoming human, but systems discovering how little humanity they actually need to function. 9. Fortress. In Fortress, the system does not experiment in laboratories. It experiments through incarceration. A privatized prison governed by algorithms, implants, and automated enforcement turns human behavior into data points to be monitored, corrected, and punished in real time. The inmates are not studied for understanding. They are optimized for compliance. Every bodily function is regulated. Reproduction is criminalized. Pain is administered mechanically without anger or judgment. The system does not hate its subjects. It simply enforces parameters. What makes Fortress resonate within the theme of human experimentation is how invisibly consent disappears. Once inside the system, resistance becomes self-harm. The rules are absolute but impersonal. Authority no longer needs faces. The prison operates like software. Deviations trigger responses. Patterns are analyzed. Individuals become profiles. Survival depends not on morality, but on adaptability within the system's constraints. Fortress suggests a future where incarceration is no longer about punishment, but about control efficiency. Human beings are no longer corrected, they are regulated. Freedom is not taken violently. It is phased out systematically until obedience feels like the only rational option. 10. Cyborg. In Cyborg, human experimentation unfolds in a world already past collapse. Civilization has failed, but systems remain desperate, fragmented, and ruthless. In this wasteland, the human body becomes the last remaining storage device. Data is more valuable than life, and people are reduced to carriers. The cyborg at the center of the film is not treated as a person, but as infrastructure. Her memories contain information critical to rebuilding society. That knowledge strips her of autonomy. Protection becomes possession. Survival becomes conditional. Unlike controlled laboratories or institutional programs, the system here is opportunistic. It adapts to chaos. Whoever controls the data controls the future. Humanity becomes collateral. What makes this form of experimentation unsettling is its pragmatism. No one claims moral authority. There is no justification beyond necessity. The experiment persists because the world has normalized exploitation as a survival strategy. Cyborg presents a future where identity dissolves under scarcity, where human beings are valued not for who they are, but for what they carry. In such a world, the line between human and system no longer matters, because both are treated as interchangeable resources. 11. The Island of Dr. Moreau. In the Island of Dr. Moreau, human experimentation is stripped of pretense and exposed as pure authority. The system is not justified by progress, security, or survival. It exists because one man believes he has the right to redesign life itself. On the island, ethics are replaced by hierarchy, and suffering is rebranded as instruction. Moreau's experiments do not aim to improve humanity. They aim to dominate it. Living beings are reshaped through pain conditioning and ritualized rules meant to simulate order. The law imposed on the subjects is not meant to protect them. It is meant to remind them of their inferiority. What makes the film resonate with the theme of people turned into systems is the way identity is enforced. The subjects are taught what they are allowed to be. Any deviation is punished as regression. Free will is framed as failure. Obedience is survival. The system persists not because it is stable, but because it is feared. Control is maintained through repetition and spectacle. Once that fear erodes, the entire structure collapses, revealing how fragile imposed order truly is. The Island of Dr. Moreau suggests a future where experimentation becomes indistinguishable from tyranny, where power no longer needs justification, only compliance. In such a world, humanity is not lost through technology, but through permission. 12. The Lawnmower Man 2. In The Lawnmower Man 2, the experiment moves fully into the digital realm. Consciousness is no longer bound to the body. The human mind becomes data expandable, transferable, and infinitely exploitable. What began as enhancement evolves into infrastructure. The system at the center of the film treats intelligence as a resource to be harvested. Individual identity is irrelevant. Minds are connected, integrated and subordinated to a centralized digital will. Consent dissolves once access is granted. What makes this vision unsettling is its familiarity. The experiment promises connectivity, efficiency, and transcendence. In reality, it erases boundaries. Thought becomes monitored. Independence becomes incompatible with integration. As the network grows, resistance is framed as corruption. Those who refuse connection are liabilities. Humanity is no longer defined by autonomy, but by bandwidth. The Lawnmower Man 2 presents a future where people are not enslaved by machines, but absorbed by them. Where the system does not replace humans, but incorporates them until nothing distinct remains. 13. Cube. In Cube, human experimentation exists without authorship. No single villain controls the system. No clear purpose is ever revealed. The experiment persists because it has become self-sustaining. People are placed inside a structure that no longer requires intent. The cube functions as pure mechanism. Movement triggers consequences. Patterns exist, but meaning does not. The individuals trapped inside are not chosen for who they are, but for how they react. Their behavior becomes the data. What makes Cube particularly disturbing is the absence of accountability. Everyone involved believes they are only responsible for a fragment. The system exists because no one is willing or able to stop it. As stress intensifies, the subjects turn on each other, not because the system demands it, but because it allows it. The experiment does not need to interfere. It simply observes. Cube suggests a future where systems outlive their creators, where humans are no longer exploited intentionally, but incidentally. Trapped not by malice, but by indifference. In this world, the most terrifying experiment is one that continues simply because it can. 14. The Cell. In the cell, human experimentation crosses the final boundary, the interior of the mind. Technology allows direct access to another person's consciousness, transforming trauma, memory, and identity into navigable landscapes. The human psyche becomes a space to be entered, mapped, and manipulated. The system justifies this intrusion as necessity. Justice demands results. Saving lives outweighs consent. The subject is immobilized, reduced to an environment rather than a person. His inner world is treated as terrain. What makes the experiment disturbing is its asymmetry. One mind is entered. The other controls the exit. Power is absolute. Vulnerability is total. As boundaries dissolve, the distinction between exploration and violation collapses. The system begins to reshape what it observes. Healing becomes indistinguishable from control. The Cell presents a future where privacy is no longer external, where even thought is subject to intervention. In such a world, the last refuge of autonomy, the mind itself becomes another system to be accessed, adjusted, and overridden. 15. Fortress 2. Re-entry in Fortress 2. Re-entry, the experiment has expanded beyond containment. The system no longer confines humanity, it hunts it. Surveillance is constant. Tracking is automated. Escape is treated as a software error to be corrected. The individuals targeted by the system are not criminals in the traditional sense. They are anomalies. People who have proven capable of resisting control. Their existence threatens the system's claim to permanence. What makes this final entry significant is its escalation. Control is no longer localized. It is orbital. Distance offers no protection. Technology has eliminated refuge. The system no longer needs prisons. It enforces compliance through reach. Wherever a human goes, the system follows. Fortress 2 closes the loop of human experimentation by revealing its end state: total integration or total elimination. In this future, freedom is not forbidden, it is obsolete. The experiment does not conclude with discovery. It concludes with enforcement. Across these films, the experiment never truly ends. It evolves. Sometimes it wears the language of science. Sometimes it hides behind security, efficiency, or survival. And sometimes it doesn't hide at all. What connects every story in this list is not technology, but permission. The moment a system decides, it is allowed to redefine what a human being is. These futures were imagined decades ago, yet they feel disturbingly familiar. Not because the machines arrived exactly as predicted, but because the logic did. Optimization over autonomy, control over consent, function over identity. The most unsettling realization is that none of these systems begin with cruelty. They begin with justification. What these films quietly ask is not whether technology will dominate humanity, but whether humanity will continue to surrender itself piece by piece in exchange for order, safety, or progress. At what point does participation become compliance? At what point does improvement turn into ownership? Vaulted Futures exists to reopen these questions, not to answer them, but to remind us they were asked long before the future arrived. Which of these experiments feels closest to becoming reality today? And more importantly, would we recognize it if it already had?